Okay, so you want to really get your English fluency up there, right? You want to sound good and you want to do it quick.
Absolutely.
I think we all do. And so for this deep dive, I think we have some really interesting stuff to talk about because we're looking at a conversation between these two students, right?
Amit and Rohan.
Amit and Rohan, exactly. And they're just talking to each other. And they have some really down-to-earth practical tips.
Yeah.
So let's kind of jump right into it. So first of all, they were talking of thinking in English. So not necessarily like translating in your head, but actually just trying to form the thought in English in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, how many times have we heard people, say, well, I think in my native language and then I have to translate it and then I can say it in English?
Right.
And Rohan's advice to Amit was like, just skip that step.
Yeah.
Why even bother?
Yeah.
Just try to think of it in English in the first place.
Right. And he was saying, like, instead of saying, mujhe chai pin khai hai, which I think is I want to drink tea in Hindi, I think is what that is. Just try to think, I want to drink tea. Like, just start with these basic things.
Right. Exactly. So it becomes less of I'm trying to translate what I'm thinking in my head in my native language and more, I'm just going to try to say what I want to say in English.
Right.
Without that middleman.
Right.
Without that middle step.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's really interesting advice. And then he was saying, like, just make it a habit to just speak every single day. And I think that's also a really good piece of advice, just like to talk, whether you're talking to other people or you're talking to yourself. He even said, like, go in front of the mirror and just, like, describe your day. Like, oh, today I woke up and then I went to college and, that kind of thing.
Sure. I mean, that's one of the things that I think people feel so self-conscious about.
Oh, yeah.
They don't want to make a mistake in front of anybody.
Yeah.
But the only way that you are going to start to be able to do this is if you actually speak.
Yeah.
And make those mistakes. And
Yes.
that's part of the process.
And realize that you're making the mistakes and correct them and then get better, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's interesting because they talked about watching movies and listening to English music, which I think is so fun. And it doesn't really feel like work.
Right. It's very passive.
It's super passive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a really good tip because he was saying, like, especially if you're a beginner watching something like Harry Potter or Jungle Book where the language is not overly complicated.
Right.
And then, also turning on the subtitles so that you can kind of see the words as you're hearing them.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's a great tip.
Yeah, I think so too. And then one of the big ones was to learn 5 new words every day and then actually try to use them in a sentence. So like Amit was like, oh, I'm excited to learn English. And he just like immediately used it in a sentence. And I think that's really smart because you're not just learning the word, you're actually, putting it to use.
Right. And so many people, I think, just learned words, but they don't actually use them.
Yeah.
So they stay very much in that passive vocabulary where you can look at it and you're like, oh, yeah, I know what that word means.
Yeah.
But when it comes to actually using it in your speaking or in your writing,
right. Yeah.
You can't access it.
You can't remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. So I think that's really good advice. And then finally, they talked about joining English speaking groups or, like apps where you can talk to people.
Yeah. I mean, this is a big one because, like I said, people are very self-conscious.
Yes.
And they don't want to make mistakes.
Yeah.
So you have to find a way that you're comfortable making mistakes.
Yeah.
And, I think a lot of people find it with friends or family.
Right.
But some people don't have that in their lives.
Yeah.
So they need to go out and seek that.
Right.
So I think joining an English speaking group is a great way to do it.
Right. Or even just like an online community.
Yeah.
Like there are so many different options. And I think Amit was saying like he just felt stuck.
Yeah.
And he felt like he wasn't able to, improve his English. So this would be a way to kind of like put it all together and actually use everything that you're learning.
Right.
With real people.
Right. And with other people who are in the same boat as you.
Exactly.
Who are trying to, work on their English too.
Right. Yeah. And not feel so self-conscious.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's just kind of recap really quickly. So you want to think in English. You want to speak every day, watch English movies, listen to English music, learn and use 5 new words every day, and then, join English speaking groups. And Rohan was really like stressing, like, be consistent. Like, you have to actually do this stuff. And they even made a deal. So only speak English.
From now on.
From that point on. Yeah.
It's a huge commitment.
It's a big commitment. Yeah. That's great. That's great. So thinking about all this stuff and thinking about these, fairly straightforward tips, what do you think is something that you could start doing today? And what's like one small thing that you think would really, help you along in your journey to fluency?
That you can actually stick with.
Yeah. What's realistic for you?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.